This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Evan Jansen. This show, of course, live broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also live on YouTube right now with our entire show available on our YouTube channel on demand. Now, on the show today, we get an update from Zimbabwe shortly, where the country's Vice President's secretary is in hospital in critical condition after being poisoned. We'll continue the hashtag Dacha debate today by looking at the case that's before the Constitutional Court. You can send us your views, hashtag Dacha debate at SABC Newsroom. Also, cooperation in tertiary education in Africa, and we'll close the show a little bit later with solar energy solutions in this country. But first, let's get the day's news from Katrine Millay.
Well, morning and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's just take a look at the top stories this morning. The Kraaifontein community north of Cape Town is in a state of shock after the bodies of 6 men were found near Joostenberg Vlakte. The men appear to have been stoned to death. Police are investigating the motive for the killing.
We have opened about 6 cases of murder for investigation. As I have already indicated, we don't know the motive, but we're appealing to the community who may have information to actually contact us, the police, Kraaifontein Police, for any information that they may have.
The body of South African school teacher Pierre Korkie is expected to arrive in Bloemfontein today. His memorial service will take place tomorrow morning, while the burial will be private. Korkie died during a failed rescue attempt by U.S. armed forces in Yemen over the weekend. Eskom says it's likely to resume rolling blackouts today and tomorrow after 2 days of reprieve. The power utility says its emergency reserves are being depleted more quickly than it can replenish them.
There is a high likelihood of load shedding on stage 1 on both Thursday and Friday. Our aspiration is to prevent load shedding in the weekend. We understand the impact on retail, so that's also why we are being conservative on Thursday and Friday in order to, as far as possible, prevent or limit load shedding over the weekend.
SADC facilitator and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is in Maseru for the signing of the electoral pledge by Lesotho's political parties today. After the signing, he will hand over the pledge to King Letsie III at the Royal Palace. The electoral pledge is a commitment by Lesotho's political parties to help create a climate conducive for the holding of elections scheduled for the 28th of February 2015. And then finally, social media platforms are buzzing this morning after the announcement that Prince Albert II of Monaco and his wife, South African-born Charlene, yesterday welcomed twin babies to the world. Baby Jacques, born 2 minutes after his sister Gabriella, will be next in line to the throne, even though she was born 2 minutes before her brother. The birth of the twins was celebrated with 42 cannon shots, 21 for each child, fired from an old fort overlooking the sea. I'll remember all those top stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can then also keep up to date and follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you, Katrine. Now, new Zimbabwean Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa's secretary is in a critical condition in Harare Hospital after a poisonous substance believed to be cyanide was reportedly sprayed into his office. President Robert Mugabe made the announcement saying it was a clear attempt on Mnangagwa's life, who was earlier named as first vice president. The appointment came a day after Vice President Joyce Mujuru was sacked for allegedly plotting to oust Mugabe. ZANU-PF has been torn by increasingly bitter infighting in the last few months as factions led by Mnangagwa and Mujuru fought to maneuver themselves into direct line to succeed the aging statesman. Now, for the latest, our Zimbabwean correspondent Shinga Inyoka has been following all these dynamics and joins us on the line from Harare in Zimbabwe. Very good morning to you, Shinga. Thank you for joining us.
Morning to you, Edith.
Shinga, just confirm this incident to us. What are they saying? Is it believed to be part of the power struggle that's engulfed ZANU-PF?
Well, those are the claims made by President Robert Mugabe. The police have said that they're still investigating, or that they've started investigations to find out what might have happened in this particular event. The facts are that the night before last, somebody broke into Emerson Mnangagwa's office at the party headquarters, which is under very tight security, and apparently laced his desk with a poisonous substance. At this stage, it's not clear what the poisonous substance was, but there's a suspicion that it might have been cyanide, but this has not been confirmed yet. At this stage, it's very difficult to know whether it's a personal attack or politically motivated. But as you pointed out, there's been a bitter infighting within the party, and it probably just reflects the kind of animosity that exists within the ZANU-PF party in this particular succession debate.
Has any arrests been made or even been questioned by police in Zimbabwe with regards to this incident?
At this stage, no formal arrests have been made. The police have been making their investigations, trying to speak to some of the people that might have been at the scene, security officials that might have seen or heard something. But really at this stage, there's still a lot of speculation about who might have tried to kill Mnangagwa.
Let's go and talk about yesterday a little bit, Shingai. Were there any surprises when Robert Mugabe made new appointments, and when are we likely to see the new Luke cabinet in effect?
Well, it was widely expected that Emerson Mnangagwa would be appointed vice president. His First Lady Grace Mugabe a few months ago had pointed out that he's somebody that she respects very much because in 2004 he had been tipped to become the vice president, but President Mugabe asked him to step aside to make way for a woman who was Joyce Mujuru. So really it's something that he's been waiting a long time for. But the largest surprise was with the ambassador Mpoko, former ambassador to South Africa, who, despite the fact that he was a senior member of the PF ZAPU party, which united with ZANU, people had widely expected that Simon Kayamoyo, who is the party chairman, would be appointed in that position. And Simon Kayamoyo has been demoted effectively after Mugabe scrapped the national chairperson seat and made him just as a Secretary for Information. So those are clearly the biggest surprises yesterday.
Then, Shinga, where does these latest developments leave the political ambitions of Grace Mugabe after orchestrating the exit, really, of Joyce Mujuru?
At this stage, what has happened appears to dovetail with what First Lady Grace Mugabe had wanted to happen. She was very clear that Joyce Mujuru must leave office, and also very clear about the person that she favored, Emerson Mnangagwa. At this stage, it's very unlikely that her ambition was the presidency, that she would have wanted to take over the presidency. It appears as if what she would have wanted was to have someone who can protect the family interests in the event that President Mugabe would step down. And clearly, Emerson Mnangagwa is somebody that the family considers more trustworthy, more loyal, less likely to be vindictive, less likely to take any kind of action against the First Lady and her business interests after President Mugabe has gone.
And finally, Shinga, this is the end of the line for Joyce Mujuru in a political sense in Zimbabwe. Is that right?
It's probably the end of the road under the President Mugabe regime. She still remains an ordinary member of the party and still retains a lot of support within the party, even though at the moment many of people who support her wouldn't want to admit it. She also is perceived as a moderate among ordinary Zimbabweans and a preferred candidate to take over as the leader of the country. So she still retains a lot of support. At this moment, it appears as if she's laying low, but in the event that President Mugabe should step down, should retire from office, she still probably has a chance, depending on what kind of a strategy or game she plays.
Well, thank you very much for that update. That's Zimbabwean correspondent Shinga Nyoka giving us an update after developments in that country in the last 24 hours. Now, the Dacha debate, hashtag, is in full swing LCCR on Newsroom, but also on social media. Even though we've only been covering it from August this year, many might argue that the actual debate sparked 4 years ago after the controversial case of the so-called Dagga couple. Not only has the case become symbolic to the cannabis community and the efforts to legalize marijuana here in South Africa, it's also become a first-of-a-kind legal matter. In 2011, the Dagga couple were granted stay in prosecution pending the outcome of the Constitutional Court case. Since then, they've been running a robust social activism campaign, and their case is still pending. The case has now led to helping others facing court action with the establishment of the so-called #JoinTheQ initiative. Now, to help us to understand the legalities involved in this case, we are joined by Advocate Robin Stransom-Ford, who is the Dagga couple's advocate. He joins us in Cape Town. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Eben.
And then we have Myrtle Clark, who is one half of the Dagga couple and also managing director of MPO Fields of Green for All. Very good morning to you, Myrtle. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity once again.
I'm a bit tangled here in the wires. Can't seem to get it right this morning, but thank you for joining us. If I can start with you, Myrtle. Let's start with your case, how you arrive at the #JoinTheQ.
Well, in 2011, as you said, we set a precedent in South African law by being granted a stay of prosecution in the North Gauteng High Court by Judge Bertelsmann. This effectively put all charges against us on hold, pending the outcome of our constitutional case. After that, we became more and more disturbed by the amount of arrests and the amount of stress that people went through at the hands of the police because of various types of Dagga charges. So in 2013, Gareth Prince, who's famous as the Dagga lawyer, who also brought a constitutional court case in the year 2000, he was the first person to join our case by also being granted a stay of prosecution. Then we decided that we were going to escalate this service that we offer.
Yeah.
And now anybody who is arrested on a Dagga charge, whether it be one spliff in your car at a roadblock or whether it be 5,000 plants under lights in a warehouse, you can join the queue, as it were. You can also apply for a stay of prosecution and join our case.
Advocate Stransom-Ford, I want to ask you about your personal decision to become involved in the #JoinTheQ. This is a watershed case expected to initiate change, I would think, and how do you see this then proceed?
Well, the history of this is that my late friend Dr. Mario Ambrosini and I were both using the cannabis protocol, having been diagnosed with terminal cancer, both of us. We decided in February of this year to launch the Medical Innovation Bill with a view to legalizing the use of cannabis for medical and industrial purposes. And so on the 18th of February, we launched the Cancer Treatment Campaign as well as the Medical Innovation Bill. Prior to that, I'd been briefed by Schindler's in the constitutional challenge to the laws prohibiting cannabis. And so I have, as it were, a dual role. And in the constitutional challenge, we propose to challenge the prohibition of cannabis across what we call the 4 platforms. They essentially involve individual sovereignty to do what one will with one's own body, be that treatment for a medical ailment, and there are a plethora of them that are assisted by cannabis, or whether it's the economic freedom to carve out a living for oneself. The industrial applications of cannabis are enormous. The medical applications have only just been arrived at, and the scientific applications are said to be vastly superior to graphene, which was a Nobel Prize winner last year. So I'm not a smoker myself, and neither was Mario, but apart from chaps getting stoned, there seems to be, on the comparator test, no reason why it should be prohibited. And on the industrial and medical grounds, there seems to be further reasons for its legalization.
Let's talk about the case before the Constitutional Court. How do you view it? The outcome, of course, you would like to see, and what are the options either way?
Well, as far as the challenge is concerned, as I say, the 4 grounds are that an individual is entitled, if I could put it in colloquial terms, to get stoned on his veranda of an evening, just as he is entitled to have a beer. And, of course, on the comparator test, what we say is that the limitation of rights clause can't rationally discriminate against a cannabis smoker when it permits the manifest evils of drink, which is associated with most crimes, and tobacco, which is associated with a plethora of illnesses. As far as Mr. Prince's case is concerned, we contend that in the context of South Africa, the right to use cannabis is an ancient and indigenous traditional right from time immemorial. In fact, it goes back to the Sumerian times, where it's recorded as being a gift from God, the plant, that is. The Rastafarian community adhered to this view, but of course the African community in South Africa have been using this plant for medical purposes, for divination purposes, and one learns a myriad of things from them. It's used for conception and contraception. So it has a vast array of uses in the traditional sense in South Africa. As far as medicine is concerned, we contend, and we have a case now for which we've just settled particulars in the challenge, we contend that an individual ought to be able to minister to himself or through his physician or health practitioner whatever is necessary to survive. And we say that has its bedrock in constitutional right to life and the right to health. As far as industry is concerned, there are probably 50 to 100 different applications for the cannabis plant, from everything to a substitute for graphene to making clothes, boots, pulp for paper. It's about 5 times more productive than wood for paper. You can use it for biofuels. Hemp fuel was used for the Model T Ford. So it has massive applications. It can be used for building materials. In fact, there's very little that can't be done with it. Yeah. If one takes unemployment into account, and one looks, for example, and we visited this area, if one looks, for example, at the rolling foothills of the Eastern Cape, they seem to be divinely ordained for massive cannabis plantations. And on an industrial scale, there are no psychotropic properties to the plant. So the cannabis plant, whether it's a sativa or indica plant, has very, very substantial economic implications. Yeah. And our contention is that in a country that's running unemployment as high as this is a single product plant that could create massive industries around big plantations. And we see this as something that the indigenous people of South Africa are quite entitled to claim as an indigenous and inalienable right.
Advocate, I just have to stop you there. We've got a developing story right now. Going to get a little update. We'll be back with the debate shortly. Yes, we're going to go live to Lesotho. Voyo Mvoko is standing by with an update on the situation in Lesotho.
Hello? Can you hear? Well, a very warm welcome to Lesotho, Maseru, where in a few minutes' time, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will be laying a wreath where about 40 people died on that fateful day, which was on the 8th of December, when South African Defence Force members crossed the border into Lesotho, killing 42 people in the process. Well, the apartheid regime, of course, argued at the time that it was a preeminent strike where members of the African National Congress were planning sabotage activities on South Africa. So here today, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will be laying a wreath. With him, of course, is the Speaker of the National Assembly, who is also the ANC chairperson, Baleka Mbete. Well, we're seeing now the Deputy President laying a wreath in one of the tombs. Well, in the background are members of the South African Police who are playing one of the popular hymns. Well, we are seeing now the Deputy Prime Minister of Lesotho also laying a wreath. And not far from where I'm standing, the chairperson of the ANC and the Speaker of the National Assembly also laying a wreath in one of the tombs. Up next, South Africa's ambassador to Lesotho also going to lay a wreath. We are going to try a little later on to speak to one of the survivors of that fateful massacre. 42 people dead at the time. And when the South African Defence Force was asked why it did what it did, Constant Viljoen, who was the army chief at the time, said it was a preemptive strike because they had intelligence information that the ANC was planning sabotage activities on South Africa. Of course, the incident was widely condemned, even among the most conservative regimes or administrations at the time. The Reagan administration of the United States among them were some of the people who condemned the barbaric act. Of course, many Basotho people died in the process. It wasn't just members of the African National Congress, Umkhonto weSizwe, and their family members, but it was also Basotho nationals who were in the area at the time. Well, right now the program director, who is South Africa's ambassador to South Africa, is just trying to give some introductions as to what exactly happened on that day and also why we are here this morning.
Well, that was South Africa's Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa laying wreaths in Lesotho for South Africans killed there during the struggle for our liberation. Of course, the SADC facilitator, Deputy President of our country, is in Lesotho for the signing of the electoral pledge in that country today. After the signing, he will hand over the pledge to King Letsie III at the Royal Palace there in that country. We were busy with the hashtag Dacha debate a little bit earlier before we crossed live there to Lesotho. Of course, I've got Myrtle Clark with me here in studio and Advocate Robin Stransom-Ford, who is in Cape Town. And Myrtle, if I can come back to you quickly, just to pick up the ball again and set the scene for us quickly. Running out of time a little bit, but just tell us about when are we likely to see an outcome in your case? Do you think you've been in the court since 2011? Delays, and what are the possible scenarios then to play out?
Our case is due to be heard in the third quarter of 2015 in the North Gauteng High Court. And the High Court will rule on the constitutionality of the matter and whether the case can then move on to the Constitutional Court. But in the meantime, we're very, very busy gathering evidence for our case, rounding up all of our expert witnesses who will be from South Africa and the rest of the world, and of course busy with Join the Queue. To date, we have 8 confirmed stays of prosecution in high courts across the country, and we have 15 cases that are pending. And as I sit here today, there's a case of a woman who had cancer, whose husband was growing plants to medicate her in the Roodepoort Magistrates Court as I sit here today.
Advocate Strasford-Brown, in your educated opinion in this case, how do you see the rest of this case before the Constitutional Court then play out? If you can just give us a quick wrap.
Yes, I think the prospects are good. I think the prospects are that good that for the moment I have a brief to bring an application to stay the criminalization of people because the typical scenario is that there are breakings, there's entry, there's confiscation, there's criminalization, fingerprinting, bail. In other words, people are being criminalized in a case that it may be unlawful for them to be prosecuted. And so the present application is to the effect that the government should ensure that these people are summoned rather than detained and criminalized. That's the next step in the process to level the playing fields before the matter is heard. But we have agreed with the state that there will be international recourse in the event for either party to the International Court of Human Rights. And we believe that the time is historically correct for this to be rectified. It was wrong for it to have been prohibited, and so it's correct for it to be legalized.
Thank you very much. That's Advocate Robin Stransom-Ford coming to us live from Cape Town also. Thank you to Myrtle Clark, one half of the Dacha couple, for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you once again. Before we go to a break, let's just take a quick look at what's happening across the country today. In Johannesburg, findings of an inquest into an accident involving President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane, will be presented in the Randburg Magistrates Court. Then in Pretoria, the Seriti Commission of Inquiry into the arms deal continues at the Sammy Mark Conference Centre. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Commission of Inquiry into the Tongaat Mall collapse will carry on, and we'll keep you updated on this platform what happened there today. But time for us to take a short commercial break. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
Who are we, you ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Zoom into Africa. This is Mali. The president is Mr. Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. Mali got independent from France on 20 June in 1960. The population is more than 16 million people. One of Mali's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit is CFA.
Well, hello and welcome back. You're with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just recap the top stories this morning. The Kraaifontein community north of Cape Town is in a state of shock after bodies of 6 men were found near Joostenberg Vlakte. The men appear to have been stoned to death. Police are investigating the motive for the killing. The body of Pierre Kortjie is expected to arrive in Bloemfontein today. His memorial service will take place tomorrow morning, while the burial will be private. Kortjie died during a failed rescue attempt by U.S. armed forces in Yemen over the weekend. And then Eskom says it's likely to resume rolling blackouts today and tomorrow after 2 days of reprieve. The power utility says its emergency reserves are being depleted more quickly than it can replenish them. Well, for all those top stories and more, you can follow us on Facebook at SABC Newsroom. Also on Twitter, we keep you up to date at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrin. Earlier this year, the African Union and UNISA signed a historic cooperation agreement that covers research, support and coordination for the development and implementation of Africa's Agenda 2063. The partnership aims to achieve a multi-campus Pan-African university, which will be a first of its kind. UNISA, the largest university in Africa and in the Southern Hemisphere, already has an impressive record of Africa-focused initiatives within Africa. The chairperson of the African Commission, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, highlighted the importance of cooperation of this nature, as the vision of a prosperous and integrated Africa cannot be achieved without the support from academic institutions. Now, in our Pretoria studio is Dr. Somodore Fikeni, who's the head of special projects in the office of the UNISA Vice-Chancellor. A very good morning to you, Dr. Fikeni. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers.
I understand the agreement was signed in October this year. Just give us some of the background and the work behind the scenes that led to the signing of what is a very important agreement.
Surely this is an unprecedented historical agreement between two very important institutions in the continent. UNISA for years has been focusing on Africa and trying to reposition itself as the leading African university, which is Africa-focused and Africa-centered. And most of its programs across the continent attest to that. At the same time, the African Union, having reached a milestone of 50 years last year, developed the Agenda 2063. And now that particular agenda is going to guide the implementation of its programs. But it became very clear that a research support and intellectual capital was needed. It is where UNISA came into play. And also the AU is in a process of establishing a Pan-African university which will be specialized and focusing on some of its programs. And that is also the main task that UNISA is going to be focusing on as part of fulfilling the mandate of this Memorandum of Understanding.
How do you see this partnership making a contribution to, let's call it, the African century?
Without any doubt, where you have seen countries or regions grow, like the Asian tigers, the Brazilian experience, Turkey and many others, it comes with proper research and development. It comes with collaboration between institutions of higher learning as well as governments or public institutions. So in this particular case, if you wanted to popularize, to conceptualize, and give content to the Agenda 2063, which in essence is going to make this the African century, then you will have to see collaboration between institutions like UNISA and the African Union. And it also dispels the notion that the African Union is merely a forum for heads of states, as it is reaching out to the civil society. But more important in this particular case is the fact that there is already an Africa rising narrative, Africa having massive resources that growing economies need and old economies need. Africa having demographic dividends of young population, growing middle class. If Africa is to avoid the previous scramble for Africa, it must have maximum collaboration within its institutions and between these key role players, which in this case is an example.
50 years is a long timeline, though, Dr. Vikeni. How do we speed up this process? Does Africa not need this kind of thing to happen in less time than that?
Without any doubt, 50 years was merely symbolic because the Organization of African Union was formed in 1963. And for the last 50 years, it has driven the decolonization agenda. It has driven many other programs. And now the focus is on development. 50 years is not the target period. There is a series of programs. Some of them are within a year, some of them 5 years, some of them 10 years. But building up and sustaining that for 50 years is the key focus.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. That's Dr. Samadoda Fikeni, who's the head of special projects in the office of the UNISA Vice Chancellor. And we're talking about the cooperation between the African Union and UNISA and in building institutions that will stand the continent in good stead. Let's take a quick look at what you are, well, a Twitter about. Of course, we had the Dakar debate a little bit earlier, and Kenny talks about most harmless guy I know faces 6 months in jail for a plant. Shouldn't that space rather be held for a murderer or a rapist? Is the question that's being asked by Kenny. Dakar magazine says we can build 10 hemp homes for the cost of every second Dakar conviction, and nobody's questioning why people still live in shacks. Talking about the Dakar debate. That's an ongoing one on social media. Bongalong says for every stoner they bust, absolutely nothing happens except the destruction of innocence. Why is the question on the hashtag Dakar debate. Ken says marijuana would basically wipe out deforestation. Dakar debate, we need legalization or decriminalization ASAP. Of course, it's a debate that sits very much within the realms of what we do. It's ongoing on social media. We've been popping in and out of it periodically. Let's take a look at what's on Newsroom's Facebook page this morning. Today, you'll see there that slain teacher Pierre Corky will be laid to rest in Bloemfontein on Saturday, following a memorial service that will be held there tomorrow. Then a ban on all important poultry products from countries infected with the avian influenza virus has now been implemented by the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. And you'll also see SADC facilitator Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has arrived in the capital of Lesotho on his 10th visit ahead of the signing of an electoral pledge by Lesotho's political parties today. Follow all of those stories and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also visit us, sabc.co.za/news for a latest update. You're watching Newsroom. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with solar energy after a short break. See you now.
closed tickets.
No people. Ik geloof mij, is een kapst. Ja, de paar bezig. Kom.
Cameroon's economic capital, a unique art collection is on display. Titled Yesterday's Memory, Tomorrow's Memory.
We are trying to preserve this heritage despite many things that have changed in the designing, embroidery and the model.
If I'm telling you, you don't like it, I call it defeat.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom on SABC News. As South Africans prepare for more rolling blackouts, the launch of the SMA Technology Solar Inverter Factory will take place in Cape Town tomorrow. Now, with the current spate of power cuts, it seems like the input of independent energy suppliers will soon be vital in keeping the lights on. Now, joining us today from Cape Town to talk a little bit more about how South Africa can benefit from solar energy is SMA CEO Torsten Ronger. A very good morning to you, Torsten. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
It seems like the launch of this inverter factory comes at just the right time. Just tell us what will happen exactly tomorrow at this launch.
Well, SMA, as the world market leader for solar inverters, will open its Cape Town factory tomorrow. The Deputy Minister of the DTI has confirmed his attendance. Premier of the Western Cape, Helen Zille, and the Provincial Minister, Alan Winde, will be there to officially inaugurate it and basically get a tour of the factory, look at the production, the test center, and the solar academy that the production will have as well.
Tell us about solar inverters. They are system managers, intelligent system managers, really. Tell us, what can they do and how exactly will they help in supplying energy?
Certainly. A solar inverter basically is the brain of a solar system. It converts DC current that is produced by solar modules, which are basically on a roof or on a ground-mounted system, into AC current, which then will be fed into the electricity grid. Solar inverters actually are sophisticated devices. They have grid management functions, and they can greatly contribute to stabilizing the energy grid. And what you have to take into account that a high quality and a reliable inverter is key to the energy yield that you want to produce with a solar system.
How much more energy can you get out of a system by using this inverter then?
Well, basically, it depends on the location in South Africa and the type of solar modules you use. You could say that one of the inverters that we will produce in Cape Town would basically cater for 2,000 megawatt hours per year of clean energy. And basically it will then power, 75 megawatt power plant would enable power for 33,000 homes.
South Africa right now, we're battling a little bit with our power grid. What are the opportunities for independent power producers in South Africa right now, and how do you see them make a contribution to the grid to alleviate the stresses that we're going through?
Well, firstly, the government actually took the right actions a few years ago to implement the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program. It is a success. We have seen many solar power plants come online, and there is a huge potential for solar in South Africa. I mean, I am from Germany originally. Germany is or it used to be the largest solar market in the world. And ironically or incidentally, South Africa has double the solar irradiation than Germany. And it seems that it would be a no-brainer to use solar to provide stable, clean and emission-free energy for South Africa.
For the world, really. But why is the technology not taking off at the rate of, at the pace that it should globally? It can really help us clean up our act on a sort of global platform.
Well, it does. I mean, the costs for solar electricity came down dramatically during the last 5 years, and governments have taken great initiatives to actually implement solar in the energy mix. South Africa, as I said, has done the first steps to do that, and we believe that there's much more upside potential to do it as well in South Africa. And the government simply needs to be bold and make a leap ahead and say, okay, we will actually have more independent power producers quickly to stabilize the grid and feed renewable or solar energy into the electricity grid.
Finally, I understand that the SMA factory also houses a solar academy in Cape Town. What type of work does the academy do?
Yes. In a nutshell, it transfers skills and technology to South African installers, engineering, procurement, and construction companies, distributors, basically our customers. We will offer theoretical and practical training on solar systems, grid-connected, off-grid systems, and so-called fuel-safe systems, where a solar system actually offsets the diesel consumption of a genset. And this will basically all take place every 4 weeks here in Cape Town. The first training will be in January, and I'm delighted that Eskom actually will send roughly 20 people to attend this first training.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That's the CEO of SMA, who is a solar technology company. Well, they're having a big launch of an inverter in Cape Town that will increase the yield in solar energy here in South Africa. And boy, it seems like we need it a lot. With the rolling blackouts, load shedding, whatever you want to call it, here in South Africa is making life at times rather difficult, doesn't it? What are your views? At SABC Newsroom, that's where you can send us your comments on the show, on all issues, whether it's Trendavani or Oscar Pistorius, solar energy, or the Dagga debate. We love your interaction. That's where we leave it today. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We also stream live on YouTube at that time with a show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You have been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.